I'm Cora, 35 years old, and my daughter Madison is the light of my life. She's only 7, but she's already survived more than most adults. Madison has a severe peanut allergy that nearly killed her last year at my sister's birthday party. What should have been a simple family gathering turned into a nightmare when my own sister gave her a deadly gift, and my mother laughed while my baby struggled to breathe. Their cruelty landed them both in prison and awakened something in me I never knew existed. A mother's rage that would stop at nothing to get justice. If you're watching this, let me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like and subscribe button, and stay with me as I share how I fought the people who should have protected us, but instead tried to take my daughter away forever. I've been a pediatric nurse for over a decade now, specializing in children with chronic conditions. The irony isn't lost on me that my own daughter would end up with a life-threatening medical condition herself. I became a single mother after my marriage to Jackson fell apart. We were young and unprepared when I got pregnant with Madison, and the stress of parenthood was too much for our already fragile relationship. He moved across the country shortly after our divorce was finalized, sending occasional birthday cards, but otherwise remaining absent from Madison's life. It was just the two of us from the time Madison was 3. We formed our own little unit, our own definition of family. Madison has always been a bright, creative child with boundless energy and curiosity. She loves art projects, collecting rocks, and has recently developed an obsession with astronomy. I've tried to give her the most normal childhood possible, despite the constant vigilance her condition requires. Madison was diagnosed with her severe peanut allergy when she was only 2 years old. We discovered it when I gave her a peanut butter sandwich for lunch one day. Within minutes, her lips began to swell. Hives broke out across her skin, and she started wheezing and gasping for air. I rushed her to the emergency room, where they administered epinephrine and steroids. The doctor told me that without immediate treatment, she could have died. That day changed everything for us. Since then, our lives have revolved around managing this invisible threat. We kept EpiPens everywhere in my purse at school, at home, at friends' houses. I trained Madison's teachers, our neighbors, and anyone who might be responsible for her care about what to do if she had an exposure. I read every food label meticulously and called restaurants ahead of time to ensure they could accommodate her dietary restrictions. This wasn't helicopter parenting, it was survival. My relationship with my own family has always been complicated. My mother, Barbara, always favored my younger sister, Natalie. Growing up, Natalie could do no wrong in our mother's eyes, while I was constantly criticized for being too sensitive, too cautious, too everything. This dynamic only worsened after Madison was born. My mother questioned every parenting decision I made, from breastfeeding to sleep training to how I handled Madison's allergy. "You're making her weak by coddling her," my mother would say when I carefully checked ingredients or asked about food preparation at family gatherings. In my day, kids just ate what was put in front of them and built up immunity. Natalie, who was always competitive with me growing up, seemed to resent the attention Madison received. She never had children of her own, focusing instead on her career in marketing. While I struggled to balance single motherhood and my nursing career, Natalie traveled the world, bought a beautiful home, and seemed to have the perfect Instagram life. Our mother never failed to point out how successful Natalie was compared to me. There were several incidents over the years that should have warned me about how dangerous my family's dismissal of Madison's allergy could be. When Madison was 4, my mother gave her a cookie at a family dinner after I'd explicitly asked about ingredients. Madison had a mild reaction that I managed with antihistamines, but when I confronted my mother, she insisted I was overreacting. "She was fine, wasn't she?" she said dismissively. "A little rash never killed anyone." Another time, Natalie suggested I was using Madison's allergy to get attention. "It's convenient how her condition means everyone has to accommodate you," she said during a particularly heated argument at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. The comment stung deeply, but I chose to limit our interactions rather than cut ties completely. Madison deserved to know her family, I thought. I would later regret that decision deeply. Despite our strained relationship, when my mother called, insisting we attend Natalie's 30th birthday party, I reluctantly agreed. It had been several months since we'd seen them, and Madison was excited about giving her aunt the handmade bracelet she'd created. I thought perhaps the time apart had improved things. I was terribly, catastrophically wrong. The morning of Natalie's birthday party, Madison woke me up early, bouncing on my bed with excitement. Mommy, do you think Aunt Natalie will like my present? She asked, her blue eyes wide with anticipation. Madison had spent days creating a beaded bracelet for her aunt, carefully selecting colors she thought Natalie would like. She's going to love it, sweetie, I assured her, though I wasn't entirely convinced. Natalie had expensive taste, and I doubted a child's craft project would impress her. But I would never discourage Madison's thoughtfulness. We spent the morning wrapping Natalie's gifts, the bracelet from Madison, and an expensive bottle of perfume I'd splurged on despite my tight budget. As I wrapped, I felt the familiar knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. Family gatherings were always stressful, and adding Madison's allergy to the mix only heightened my concerns. Madison, let's have our safety talk before we go, I said as we prepared to leave. This was our routine before any social event. I know, Mom, Madison sighed, but sat down attentively anyway. No food unless you check it first. If I feel funny, tell you right away. My EpiPen is in your blue purse. That's right. I smiled, always impressed by her maturity. And what are the symptoms we watch for? Itchy tongue, tight throat, hard to breathe, bumpy skin, she recited. It broke my heart that my 7-year-old had to memorize these things, but it was our reality. We arrived at my mother's suburban home at precisely 2 o'clock. The house was already filled with guests, mostly my mother's friends and Natalie's colleagues. The living room was decorated with expensive-looking floral arrangements and a banner reading, 30 and Fabulous. My mother greeted us at the door with air kisses, careful not to muss her perfectly styled silver hair. You're finally here, she said, looking me up and down critically. Everyone else arrived on time. No mention of how nice it was to see us or how much Madison had grown since the last visit. Madison rushed forward to hug her grandmother. Happy birthday to Aunt Natalie, Grandma. It's not your aunt's birthday yet, dear. The party starts at 3, and careful with my dress, it's silk, my mother replied gently, pushing Madison away. I swallowed my retort and followed them inside, carrying our gifts. Natalie was holding court in the center of the living room, wearing a designer dress and laughing loudly with a group of friends. She spotted us and waved, not bothering to break away from her conversation. Barbara, is that Cora and the little one? An older woman asked my mother. My goodness, I haven't seen them in ages. Yes, that's them, my mother replied flatly, as if our presence was an obligation rather than a joy. I guided Madison to the food table to check what was safe for her to eat. Remember nothing without checking with me first, I reminded her. The spread was elaborate finger sandwiches, a cheese board, fresh fruit, and various pastries. I discreetly asked my mother about ingredients. For heaven's sake, Cora, it's a party, not a hospital, she said loud enough for nearby guests to hear. There's fruit she can eat. I'm not going to list every ingredient in everything. Mom, this is serious. Madison has a life-threatening allergy, I insisted, feeling my face flush with embarrassment and anger. Fine, she sighed dramatically. The fruit is safe. The sandwiches have no peanuts, but were made in the same kitchen as other things. Happy now? It wasn't ideal, but I nodded and helped Madison select some fruit and a bottled water I'd brought from home. We found seats in a corner where I could keep an eye on her. As the party progressed, I noticed Natalie and my mother having several whispered conversations, glancing our way occasionally. It made me uneasy, but I dismissed it as paranoia born from years of tension. About an hour into the party, Natalie announced it was time for gifts. Everyone gathered in the living room with Natalie seated in an ornate chair like a queen on her throne. Guests took turns presenting their offerings, which Natalie opened with exaggerated enthusiasm. When it was our turn, Madison stepped forward shyly. I made this for you, Aunt Natalie, she said, holding out her small, neatly wrapped package. Natalie unwrapped it with a fixed smile. Oh, how creative, she said, barely glancing at the colorful bracelet before setting it aside. She opened my gift next, showing more genuine appreciation for the expensive perfume. Just as I thought we'd survive the gift-giving without incident, Natalie clapped her hands. And now I have a special gift for my niece, she announced, surprising everyone. It wasn't Madison's birthday after all. My mother brought out an elaborately wrapped box with a large purple bow, Madison's favorite color. A chill ran down my spine as they presented it to her. "You shouldn't have," I said, trying to keep my voice light while alarm bells rang in my head. "Nonsense," my mother replied. "Natalie wanted to do something special for Madison." Madison looked to me for permission, her eyes bright with excitement. Against my better judgment, I nodded, though I resolved to inspect whatever was inside before allowing her to touch it. "Can I open it now?" Madison asked, already tugging at the ribbon. "Of course, sweetheart," Natalie said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I made these just for you." I noticed my mother and sister exchange a knowing glance that made my stomach drop. Before I could intervene, Madison had torn away the wrapping to reveal a box of homemade cookies beautifully decorated to look like stars and moons, connecting to her love of astronomy. "Wow, thank you, Aunt Natalie," Madison exclaimed, reaching for a cookie. "Wait, Madison," I said sharply, moving to take the box. "Let me see those first." But Madison, in her excitement, had already taken a bite of a star-shaped cookie. My heart stopped as I watched her chew and swallow. "These taste funny," she said, her forehead creasing in confusion. I grabbed the box and sniffed one of the cookies, the distinctive smell of peanut butter immediately apparent. Horror washed over me as I looked up to see Natalie and my mother watching with small smiles. "What did you put in these?" I demanded, already reaching for my purse, where I kept Madison's EpiPen. "Just a little peanut butter," Natalie said casually, "to show you she's not really allergic. Kids just need exposure to build tolerance." Madison was already beginning to wheeze, her face flushing as hives appeared on her neck. "My purse," I gasped, looking around frantically. "Where's my blue purse?" "Oh, I put it in the bedroom for safekeeping," my mother said, making no move to retrieve it. "Don't be so dramatic, Cora. It's just a tiny bit of peanut butter." "She's having an anaphylactic reaction," I screamed, rushing to Madison, who was now clutching her throat, her breathing becoming increasingly labored. "Someone call 911. The other guests stood frozen, unsure whether this was a real emergency or family drama. My mother and Natalie remained seated, rolling their eyes. "She's faking," Natalie said to the room. "Cora has taught her to do this for attention." I abandoned the search for my purse to hold Madison, whose lips were turning blue. "Please," I begged the room, "someone help us." A woman I didn't know stepped forward. "I'm a doctor. This child needs epinephrine immediately. Where is it?" "In my purse in the bedroom." I sobbed as Madison went limp in my arms. The doctor barked orders to another guest to call an ambulance while I ran to find my purse. I tore through my mother's immaculate bedroom, finally finding my purse hidden in her closet behind some shoe boxes. I rushed back to Madison's hands, shaking as I administered the EpiPen to her thigh through her clothes. Madison was unconscious now, her breathing shallow despite the epinephrine. "The ambulance is 3 minutes out," someone said. My mother finally approached, her face showing the first signs of concern. "Is she really that allergic? I thought you were exaggerating." I couldn't even look at her. "If she dies," I said through clenched teeth, "I will never forgive you, either of you." Natalie stood awkwardly by the door, the reality of what she'd done finally seeming to sink in. "It was just supposed to be a little lesson," she mumbled. The paramedics arrived and quickly assessed Madison's condition. Their urgency confirmed what I already knew: this was life-threatening. As they loaded her onto a stretcher, one paramedic asked what she'd ingested. "Peanut butter," I said, glaring at my sister. "They gave it to her deliberately." The paramedic's eyes widened, but he focused on Madison. "We need to move now. She's in severe anaphylactic shock." As we rushed toward the ambulance, I heard my mother behind me. "You're ruining Natalie's party," she called. "Why do you always have to make everything about you?" In that moment, as my daughter fought for her life, I knew our relationship with my family was irreparably broken. And I knew with cold certainty that I would make them pay for what they'd done. The ambulance ride was a blur of beeping monitors and urgent voices. Madison remained unconscious despite a second dose of epinephrine administered by the paramedics. I held her small hand, whispering desperate prayers as the ambulance sped toward County General Hospital. "BP's dropping," one paramedic announced. "Pulse ox down to 82. "Is she going to be okay?" I asked, my voice breaking. The paramedic's expression was grim. We're doing everything we can, ma'am. Anaphylaxis, this severe, is very dangerous. Did you say she only had one bite of the cookie? Yes, I choked out. Just one bite. He shook his head. Must have been highly concentrated. This reaction is more severe than typical exposure. That detail lodged in my mind like a splinter. Not just peanut butter then, but concentrated peanut extract. This wasn't a misguided attempt to disprove an allergy. This was deliberate harm. We arrived at the emergency room where a team was waiting. They whisked Madison away, leaving me trembling in the hallway, until a nurse guided me to a private waiting area. I collapsed into a chair, the adrenaline that had been sustaining me suddenly evaporating. An hour later, a doctor in scrubs entered the room, her face serious. Ms. Winters, I'm Dr. Patel, the attending physician treating your daughter. I stood on shaky legs. How is she? Madison is stable but critical, she said. The anaphylaxis caused her airways to severely constrict, and she wasn't getting enough oxygen for some time. We've intubated her and are administering steroids and antihistamines, but I need to be honest with you. The next 24 hours are crucial. Is she going to survive? I whispered the question I was terrified to ask. Dr. Patel placed a gentle hand on my arm. I wish I could give you guarantees, but I can't. Her reaction was extremely severe, and there could be complications from the oxygen deprivation. We're monitoring her brain function closely. The room seemed to tilt around me. Can I see her? She's being transferred to the pediatric ICU. A nurse will take you there shortly. Dr. Patel hesitated before adding, the hospital has contacted the police. Deliberately exposing a child to a known allergen constitutes assault. An officer will want to speak with you. I nodded numbly. I want to press charges. I understand. First, let's focus on getting you to your daughter. The PICU was quiet, except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Madison looked tiny in the hospital bed. A breathing tube down her throat, IVs in both arms. Her face was still swollen, making her almost unrecognizable. I sat beside her carefully, taking her hand between mine. I'm here, baby, I whispered. Mommy's here. You're going to be okay. As I sat in that sterile room, memories washed over me in waves. Madison's birth, her first steps, teaching her to read our movie nights curled up on the couch. The possibility of losing her was unthinkable. I rested my head near her hand and finally allowed myself to break down sobbing until I had nothing left. A nurse came in to check Madison's vitals. The police are here when you're ready, she said softly. I don't want to leave her, I replied. You can speak to them right here, she assured me. I'll stay with Madison while you talk. 2 officers entered the room, a man and woman in uniform. They introduced themselves as Officers Rivera and Chen from the County Police Department. We understand your daughter was intentionally exposed to a known allergen, Officer Rivera said, his voice low out of respect for our surroundings. I nodded, wiping my tears. My sister Natalie made cookies with peanut butter, knowing Madison has a life-threatening peanut allergy. My mother was complicit. They both claimed they were trying to prove her allergy wasn't real. You're certain they knew about the allergy beforehand? Officer Chen asked, taking notes. Absolutely. Madison was diagnosed 5 years ago. They've been told countless times. We bring her EpiPen everywhere. When she started reacting, my mother admitted she'd hidden my purse containing the EpiPen. They watched her collapse and did nothing. Officer Rivera's jaw tightened. We'll need statements from witnesses at the party. There were at least 20 people there, I said. Many of them heard Natalie admit she put peanut butter in the cookies deliberately. Do you have any remaining cookies as evidence? Officer Chen asked. I don't, but there might be some left at my mother's house. We'll get a warrant to search the premises, Officer Rivera assured me. In the meantime, we'd like to formally take your statement when you're ready. As they were leaving, a text message from my neighbor Judy, who had attended the party, lit up my phone. Just heard Madison is in the hospital. Is she okay? I can't believe what your sister did. I took photos of those cookies before the paramedics came in case you need them. I showed the message to the officers, feeling the first spark of hope that justice might be possible. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I refused to leave Madison's bedside except to use the bathroom. Hospital staff brought me food and a cot to sleep on. Gradually, Madison's condition improved enough to remove the breathing tube, though she remained sedated. On the fourth day, Dr. Patel delivered mixed news. Madison is out of immediate danger, she explained, but we're seeing some concerning test results. The prolonged oxygen deprivation may have affected her heart. We'll need to run more tests, and she might need to see a cardiologist long term. I absorbed this information like a physical blow. Not only had my family nearly killed my daughter, but they might have left her with permanent damage. My grief began to crystallize into something harder, sharper. Later that day, Detective Sarah Marshall from the Major Crimes Division took over the case. She visited us in the hospital room, her manner professional but kind. "We've executed a search warrant at Barbara Winter's residence," she informed me. "We found the remaining cookies which are being tested. We've also obtained text messages between your mother and sister discussing their plan to test Madison's allergy." "They texted about it?" I asked, incredulous. "Yes, the language is quite explicit. Your sister wrote, 'I got the peanut extract. Mom says this will finally prove Cora is just being dramatic about the whole allergy thing.'" I closed my eyes, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible. What happens now? Based on the evidence and witness statements we're pursuing, charges of assault with intent to cause bodily harm and child endangerment. Given the severity of Madison's reaction and the premeditation involved, these are serious felony charges. As she spoke, Madison's hand twitched in mine, her eyes fluttering open for the first time in days. I forgot everything else, focusing entirely on my daughter's return to consciousness. "Madison, baby, can you hear me?" Her eyes found mine, confusion giving way to recognition. She couldn't speak yet due to throat irritation from the breathing tube, but she squeezed my hand weakly. Detective Marshall stepped back, giving us privacy. "I'll return tomorrow," she said quietly. "Take care of your little girl." As Madison drifted back to sleep, I made a silent promise to her. The people who did this would face consequences no matter that they were family. No one would hurt my child and walk away unscathed. Not even her own grandmother and aunt. 2 weeks after the incident, Madison was finally discharged from the hospital. Her recovery would be a long process, with ongoing concerns about potential heart damage from the severe reaction. We returned to our small apartment, which I'd hastily child-proofed even further during a brief trip home to gather clothes and supplies. Madison was subdued, a shadow of her formerly vibrant self. The trauma of her near-death experience had left invisible scars that concerned me more than the physical ones. "Mommy, why did Aunt Natalie want to hurt me?" she asked one night as I tucked her into bed, the question piercing my heart. "She didn't understand how serious your allergy is." I answered carefully, unsure how to explain such deliberate cruelty to a child. "Some people don't believe in things they can't see." "But you believed me," she said, her small face serious in the glow of her nightlight. "Always, baby. I will always believe you and protect you." With Madison settled at home, I turned my attention to the legal process that was now in motion. Detective Marshall had arranged a meeting with Assistant District Attorney James Wilson, who would be prosecuting the case. ADA Wilson's office was cluttered but organized with stacks of files that spoke to his heavy caseload. He was younger than I expected, with kind eyes that hardened when he reviewed the details of our case. "First, let me say how sorry I am about what happened to your daughter," he began. "I've reviewed the evidence, and I believe we have a strong case for assault and child endangerment against both your sister and mother." "Will they actually face jail time?" I asked, trying to keep the emotion from my voice. "Or will they just get probation because they're family?" "The premeditated nature of this act makes it especially serious," Wilson explained. "The text messages showing they planned this, the concentrated peanut extract they used hiding the EpiPen. These aren't the actions of people who simply didn't understand an allergy. These are deliberate attempts to cause harm." "My mother claims she thought I was exaggerating the allergy," I said. "That's been her defense to everyone." Wilson leaned forward. "Ms. Winters, a 7-year-old child, was hospitalized in critical condition for days. Multiple medical professionals have confirmed the severity of her allergy. Your daughter's medical records show previous reactions and hospital visits. No reasonable person could claim ignorance at this point. His confidence reassured me, but I was still anxious. They've hired Stanley Richardson as their attorney, I told him. Richardson was known for defending wealthy clients in our county with a reputation for aggressive tactics. I'm familiar with Stan's work. Wilson nodded. He'll try to paint this as a family misunderstanding blown out of proportion. Our job is to keep the focus on the facts and the harm done to Madison. As predicted, the legal battle quickly turned ugly. My mother and sister pleaded not guilty at their arraignment with Richardson, arguing that they had no intent to cause serious harm. Outside the courthouse, he gave a statement to local reporters, portraying my mother and sister as concerned family members who were trying to help Madison overcome what they believed was a psychosomatic condition. This is a tragic misunderstanding between family members with different perspectives on child rearing, Richardson told the cameras. No one wanted that child to be harmed. The story had caught the attention of local media, partly because of the unusual nature of the case. Food allergy advocacy groups reached out offering support and resources. I was initially reluctant to make our family drama public, but realized the case could raise awareness about the dangers of not taking food allergies seriously. I agreed to a single interview with a respected local journalist, focusing on Madison's condition and the importance of allergy awareness rather than vilifying my family. The resulting article was balanced but impactful, generating significant community support. Meanwhile, the pressure from extended family was intense. Cousins, aunts, and uncles I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly called and emailed urging me to drop the charges. Family should work things out privately, my father's sister insisted. Think about what this is doing to your mother's reputation. They nearly killed my daughter, I responded. What about Madison's right to be safe? Others were more direct in their criticism. You always were vindictive, one cousin wrote. No one meant any harm. You're destroying lives over a mistake. These messages hurt, but they also strengthened my resolve. If my extended family couldn't understand the gravity of what had happened, they didn't deserve a place in our lives either. Richardson's legal strategy became clear at the preliminary hearing. He portrayed Madison's allergy as relatively mild, suggesting I had a history of overreacting to minor symptoms. He submitted affidavits from family members claiming I had coached Madison to believe she was more allergic than she really was. The strategy infuriated me, but ADA Wilson was prepared. He presented Madison's complete medical records, including documentation of previous reactions and letters from her allergist confirming the severity of her condition. He also called the emergency room doctor who had treated Madison after the birthday party. In your professional opinion, Dr. Patel, was this a severe allergic reaction? Wilson asked. It was one of the most severe cases of anaphylaxis I've seen in 15 years of emergency medicine, Dr. Patel testified. Without emergency intervention, Madison Winters would almost certainly have died from respiratory failure. Richardson tried to suggest that something other than peanuts might have caused the reaction, but the lab results from the cookies showed concentrated peanut extract, far more than would be used in normal baking. By the end of the preliminary hearing, Judge Ortega ruled there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. Outside the courtroom, I came face to face with my mother and sister for the first time since the incident. How could you do this to us? My mother hissed, her perfectly manicured hand gripping her designer handbag. After everything I've done for you. You nearly killed my daughter, I replied, keeping my voice steady. What did you expect me to do? It was a mistake, Natalie said, her eyes darting around to see if anyone was watching. We never meant for her to get that sick. You're ruining our lives over a misunderstanding. A mistake, I echoed in disbelief. You deliberately put peanut extract in cookies you gave to a child with a known peanut allergy. You hid her EpiPen. You laughed while she couldn't breathe. That's not a mistake, that's attempted murder. Richardson quickly stepped between us, ushering my mother and sister away. No further comment, he said firmly. As they walked away, I noticed how small they seemed now. The fear and reverence I'd always felt toward my mother had evaporated, replaced by clarity about who she really was. For the first time, I felt truly free of their toxic influence, though the price of that freedom had been nearly unbearable. The trial began 3 months after the incident. Madison had returned to school part-time, still dealing with fatigue and anxiety, but slowly regaining her spirit. Her cardiologist had confirmed mild heart muscle damage that would require ongoing monitoring, a permanent reminder of what my family had done. The courthouse was crowded on the first day of proceedings. Our case had garnered significant attention, particularly from food allergy advocacy groups who saw it as an important precedent for taking allergies seriously. I'd been careful to shield Madison from the media attention, but she knew her grandmother and aunt were in trouble for the bad cookies. A. Wilson's opening statement was powerful in its simplicity. "This case is about a betrayal of trust in its most basic form," he told the jury. "A grandmother and aunt who deliberately exposed a 7-year-old child to a substance they knew could kill her, not out of ignorance, but out of a desire to prove they knew better than medical professionals, better than the child's mother, better than years of documented medical history." Richardson countered with a narrative of family misunderstanding and exaggeration. The Winters family believed, based on their observations, that Madison's allergy was being exaggerated by her mother. They made a misguided attempt to demonstrate this, never imagining the severe reaction that followed. This was a terrible error in judgment, but not a criminal act. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented the text messages between my mother and sister, planning what they called their little experiment. Natalie had written, "I got the extra strength peanut extract. This should finally prove whether she's actually allergic or Cora is just being dramatic as usual." My mother had replied, "Perfect. Make them look like those astronomy things she likes. She won't suspect a thing. And hide Cora's purse so she can't make a scene with that EpiPen she's always waving around." The defense tried to have these messages excluded as prejudicial, but Judge Ortega overruled, finding them central to establishing intent. Witness testimony was equally damning. Several party guests testified to hearing Natalie admit she deliberately put peanut butter in the cookies and to seeing my mother hide my purse. One guest, a retired school nurse, described how she'd begged them to retrieve the EpiPen, while Madison struggled to breathe. "They just stood there," the nurse testified. The grandmother said it was just a performance and would stop when they stopped paying attention to it. Even when the child's lips turned blue, they did nothing. The medical evidence was irrefutable. Madison's allergist testified about her history of severe reactions. The ER doctor and paramedics described her life-threatening condition upon arrival. The lab technician who tested the remaining cookies confirmed they contained concentrated peanut extract, far more than would be used in normal baking. Based on our analysis, the technician testified, these cookies contained approximately 5 times the peanut protein of a normal peanut butter cookie. This concentration would trigger a severe reaction, even in someone with a moderate allergy. Richardson's defense strategy grew increasingly desperate. He tried to portray my mother and sister as loving family members who had made a terrible mistake. He brought in character witnesses who spoke about their community involvement and charitable work. He even suggested that the stress of my divorce had caused me to exaggerate Madison's condition for attention. This last tactic backfired when Wilson produced records showing I'd only sought medical care for Madison's allergy, after documented reactions observed by medical professionals, never based solely on my own reports. The most difficult day was when Madison testified via closed-circuit television, an accommodation the judge granted to reduce her trauma. She sat in a room with a victim advocate answering questions about what happened at the party. Her testimony was heartbreakingly simple. "Aunt Natalie gave me cookies that made me very sick," she said in her small voice. "I couldn't breathe and my throat hurt really bad. I was scared I was going to die." When asked if she knew she shouldn't eat peanuts, Madison nodded. "Mommy always checks my food, but Aunt Natalie said she made the cookies special for me." During cross-examination, Richardson was gentle, but tried to suggest Madison might have eaten something else that caused her reaction. Madison was firm. "It was the star cookie. It tasted funny, and then my throat got tight right away." The most shocking revelation came during the prosecution's cross-examination of my sister. Under Wilson's questioning, Natalie eventually admitted this wasn't the first time they had tested Madison's allergy. "You've tried to expose Madison to peanuts before, haven't you?" Wilson asked. After attempting to evade the question, Natalie finally conceded. We put a little peanut oil in her food once before just to see if anything would happen. And did anything happen? Wilson pressed. She got some hives, but it wasn't serious, Natalie said defensively. That's why we thought Cora was exaggerating about how severe it was. This admission stunned even Richardson, who hadn't been informed of this previous incident. It destroyed any remaining credibility in the defense's claim of innocent misunderstanding. After a 2-week trial, the case went to the jury. They deliberated for just 6 hours before returning with a verdict guilty on all counts for both my mother and sister. At the sentencing hearing, Judge Ortega addressed my mother and sister directly. "The court takes no pleasure in sentencing family members in a case like this," she said gravely. "But the evidence shows a disturbing pattern of behavior that goes beyond simple ignorance or mistake. You deliberately exposed a child to a known allergen, took steps to prevent emergency treatment, and showed callous disregard for her suffering." She sentenced my mother to 3 years in state prison, noting that while she wasn't the primary actor, she was complicit in both the planning and execution of the crime, as well as in hindering emergency treatment by hiding the EpiPen. Natalie received 5 years due to her role in planning the test, purchasing concentrated peanut extract, and the revelation of the previous exposure attempt. Both sentences were substantial for first-time offenders, reflecting the judge's view of the seriousness of the crime. As they were led away in handcuffs, my mother looked back at me with an expression of betrayal that might once have devastated me. Now I felt only a sad certainty that justice had been served, though the cost had been unbearably high. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked how I felt about the verdict. "There's no victory here," I told them honestly. "My daughter will carry the physical and emotional scars of this betrayal for life. I hope this case helps others understand that food allergies are serious medical conditions, not exaggerations or bids for attention. Disbelieving someone's allergy isn't just unkind, it can be deadly." As we drove home, Madison asked a question that had clearly been on her mind. "Are Grandma and Aunt Natalie bad people, Mommy?" I considered how to answer truthfully while still being age-appropriate. "They made very bad choices," I finally said. "Sometimes good people do terrible things when they're too proud to admit they're wrong. But what they did was very wrong, and there have to be consequences for that." Madison was quiet for a moment. "I don't think I want to see them again," she said in a small voice. "That's okay," I assured her. "We get to choose who's part of our lives, and right now we're going to focus on people who make us feel safe and loved." She nodded, looking out the window. "Can we still go to the planetarium this weekend?" "Absolutely," I promised, grateful for her resilience. "The stars are waiting for us." 1 year after the trial, Madison and I were settling into our new life in a different city 300 miles from our old home. The move had been necessary for both practical and emotional reasons. Madison needed a fresh start away from the notoriety of the case, and I had found a position at a pediatric hospital with a specialized allergy department. Our new apartment was smaller but brighter, with a little balcony where Madison had started a container garden. She'd recovered physically, though she still saw a cardiologist every 6 months to monitor the slight heart damage from her severe reaction. The emotional healing was ongoing, but she was making progress with the help of weekly therapy sessions. "Dr. Lowenstein says I'm getting better at my worry thoughts," Madison told me one evening as we prepared dinner together. At 8 years old now, she insisted on helping with meal preparation, part of her therapy for food anxiety. "That's wonderful, sweetie," I said, watching as she carefully washed vegetables, a task she could control completely. "What strategy are you using?" "The thought detective one," she replied. "When I think something's scary about food, I look for clues about whether it's really true or just my brain being overprotective." Her therapist had developed this approach specifically for children with food trauma, and it seemed to be working. Madison was slowly expanding the range of food she felt safe eating, though she remained understandably cautious. The move had also given me space to process my own complicated feelings about what had happened. I'd started attending a support group for parents of children with severe allergies, finding comfort in sharing experiences with others who understood the constant vigilance required. 3 months after we moved, I received the first letters from my mother and sister in prison. They arrived on the same day forwarded from our old address. I set them aside, unsure whether reading them would help or harm my healing process. After discussing it with my own therapist, I decided to open them. My mother's letter was predictably self-centered, focusing on the hardships of prison life and how the case had destroyed our family. She expressed regret that things got out of hand, but stopped short of taking full responsibility. The closest she came to an apology was writing, "I never thought it would be so serious. I hope someday you can forgive me for misjudging the situation." Natalie's letter was more reflective. Prison had apparently given her time to consider her actions. "I've been working with a therapist here who specializes in family dynamics," she wrote. "She's helping me understand the jealousy and resentment I've carried toward you since childhood. It doesn't excuse what I did, but I'm beginning to understand why I was so determined to prove you wrong, even about something as serious as Madison's allergy." She continued, "I think part of me wanted to prove you were being dramatic, because then I could dismiss everything about you that made me feel inadequate. You were always the responsible one, the one who succeeded at the things that mattered, like being a good mother. I'm truly sorry for the harm I caused Madison. I understand if you never want to see or hear from me again." I didn't respond to either letter immediately. I needed time to process my feelings and decide what boundaries would be healthy for Madison and me moving forward. Forgiveness, I was learning, didn't necessarily mean reconciliation or continuing a relationship. Meanwhile, our new life was slowly taking shape. Madison had made friends at her new school where the staff were well trained in allergy management. I'd connected with colleagues at the hospital who became part of our support system. We'd even adopted a cat named Galileo, continuing Madison's astronomy theme and giving her a source of unconditional love. 6 months after receiving the letters, I got an unexpected call from my father, who had been largely absent from my life since divorcing my mother when I was a teenager. "I heard about what happened," he said awkwardly. "I should have reached out sooner, but I didn't know what to say. What Barbara and Natalie did was unforgivable." "Why are you calling now?" I asked, neither accepting nor rejecting his overture. "I'm not getting any younger," he admitted. "And I realized I have a granddaughter I've never really known. I'd like to change that if you're open to it." I was cautious, but not dismissive. Madison has been through a lot. Anyone in her life needs to understand and respect her medical needs without question. "Of course," he said quickly. "I've been reading about food allergies since I heard about the trial. I would never do anything to put her at risk." We arranged a video call for him to meet Madison, with the understanding that any future relationship would develop slowly and on Madison's terms. To my surprise, they connected over a shared interest in astronomy, with my father sharing stories about the constellations his father had taught him to identify. A tentative relationship began to form, bringing an unexpected positive from the wreckage of what had happened. It wasn't the family I'd grown up with, but it was perhaps the family Madison and I needed now. As Madison's therapy progressed, her therapist suggested that writing a letter to her grandmother and aunt might help process her feelings, even if she never sent it. Madison thought about it for days before deciding she wanted to try. "Dear Grandma and Aunt Natalie," she wrote in her careful third-grade handwriting, "I was very sad and scared when you gave me cookies with peanuts. My throat hurt and I thought I was going to die. I don't understand why you did that when you knew peanuts make me very sick." She continued, "Dr. Lowenstein says sometimes I can be angry at someone, but still love them a little bit too. I'm still very angry at you, but I hope you learn about allergies in prison so you don't hurt any other kids. Mom says we don't have to see you when you get out if we don't want to. I don't know what I want yet." She signed it simply Madison, with a small star drawn next to her name. Reading her letter brought tears to my eyes. Her ability to express her feelings so honestly, without the bitterness that sometimes colored my own thoughts, was remarkable. I asked if she wanted to send the letter, but Madison shook her head. "Not yet," she said. "Maybe someday." I respected her decision, putting the letter in a drawer where she could revisit it if she ever changed her mind. As the one-year anniversary of the trial approached, I received a call from Sarah Miller, one of the food allergy advocates who had supported us during the legal process. Your case has made a real difference, she told me. 3 states have now introduced legislation to classify deliberate allergen exposure as assault. They're calling it Madison's Law. The news was bittersweet. I was proud that our painful experience might help protect other children, but sad that such laws were necessary at all. Will you and Madison consider speaking at a conference next month? Sarah asked. Your story puts a human face on why these protections are so important. After discussing it with Madison and her therapist, we agreed to participate in a moderated panel discussion. Madison was nervous but determined, saying, "If it helps other kids with allergies, I want to do it." The conference was her first public appearance since the trial, and she handled it with remarkable poise. When asked what she wanted people to know about food allergies, she said simply, "They're real even if you can't see them, and they can be really scary." Her words, spoken with the straightforward honesty of a child, seemed to touch the audience more deeply than any expert testimony could have. That evening, as I tucked Madison into bed, she asked a question that had clearly been on her mind. "Mom, do you think Grandma and Aunt Natalie will ever understand what they did wrong?" I sat on the edge of her bed, considering how to answer honestly. "I don't know, sweetheart. Some people find it very hard to admit when they're wrong, especially when they've done something really serious. But people can change and learn, especially when they have consequences for their actions." "Like jail?" she asked. "Yes, like jail, but also like losing relationships with people they care about." Madison was quiet for a moment. "I think I'm glad we moved here," she finally said. "I like our new friends better. They believe me about my allergy." "That's what family should do," I told her. "Believe you and keep you safe. Sometimes the family we choose is better than the one we're born into." As I turned out her light, leaving just the glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling, I reflected on how far we'd come. The path to healing wasn't linear, and we would likely face more challenges as my mother and sister eventually completed their sentences. But Madison and I had built something precious from the aftermath of betrayal, a life defined by trust, respect, and genuine care, rather than obligation or blood ties. In protecting my daughter, I had finally learned to protect myself as well, setting boundaries that should have been established long ago. The price had been almost unbearably high, but the lesson was invaluable. True, family is defined by love and safety, not DNA. Madison was sleeping peacefully now. Galileo curled at her feet. Tomorrow we would visit the planetarium, continue our container gardening, and live our imperfect but authentic lives. And that was enough. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to distance yourself from toxic family members? Do you believe some actions are truly unforgivable, or is there always a path to reconciliation? I hope sharing our story has helped someone feeling torn between family obligation and protecting themselves or their children. Remember that choosing your own safety is never selfish. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be facing similar difficult choices. Thank you for listening to our journey, and I wish you the courage to create the family you deserve, whether by birth or by choice.